When we start to put our choices under a microscope, as we do on the healing journey, we might find ourselves face to face with old hurts, things that happened in our childhoods that did us harm, the way our parents treated us, maybe, or adult traumas like toxic relationships, death and divorce, toxic jobs, any kind of traumatic event that can leave a lasting imprint on the way that we think and feel about ourselves and the choices that we make. And if we have those hurts under the hood of our health issues and we overlook or ignore them, the truth is that we're going to oftentimes to struggle to thrive. We might struggle to make the healthiest choices. So I've got a very special guest with me today to talk to us about our emotional roadblocks and root causes. And I can't wait to introduce you to her. So let's dig in. Hello, thyroid drivers. Welcome back to another episode of Thyroid-Healthy Bites, a weekly podcast dedicated to helping you live well and eat well so you can feel well. I'm Ginny Mahar, your host and the face behind the apron at hypothyroidchef.com. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the show. I've got a very important question for you as we dig into today's show. Our topic for today is emotional roadblocks and root causes. So the question that I want to pose to you that you can just maybe put in the back of your mind as you're listening to today's episode is this. What have you maybe been overlooking on your healing journey in regard to emotional trauma? What have you maybe been overlooking on your healing journey in regard to emotional trauma? I think this is a really important question because, as a patient advocate, as a health coach, what I see is this seems like a very overlooked root cause. It's easy to ignore. We can get hyper focused on things like food and supplements and exercise, and all of that is very important. It's all, a piece of the whole puzzle, right? But this is something that, I think can be hard to look at, and maybe we're just not aware of how it's getting in our way of our healing goals, of our health goals and where we want to get with our health. So I've got a very special guest here with me today, Mandy Harvey, who's going to help us understand emotional and trauma-based roadblocks and root causes. How can we build awareness of them and how can we overcome them? So welcome to Thyroid-Healthy Bites, Mandy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to our conversation. You have so much expertise in this area and you have a really powerful personal story as well. Before we get into that, I'd love to share a little bit more about you with the listeners. So Mandy Harvey is a leader in the field of trauma healing, as well as an in-demand inspirational speaker. She specializes as a trauma healing guide for nutrition and health coaches, helping them become the go-to coach who can guide any client through their blocks and create lasting change. And this is actually how I connected with you, Mandy, as a health coach wanting to expand my offerings and how I can support my coaching clients as well. So Mandy's superpower is showing coaches how to bridge that gap between their nutrition education and their clients' resistance to change, and empowers them with vital trauma-informed expertise and somatic skills, which I'm excited to talk about, to help them successfully lead their clients through life-altering transformations. Mandy's extraordinary story of transforming her own life from devastating childhood trauma and a near-death experience to courageously facing and healing mentally, physically, oh my gosh, mentally, physically, and emotionally from the past, learning to embrace her authentic truth and designing the life of her dreams is the inspiration behind her bold mission to teach others that it is possible to do the same. So yeah, again, Mandy, I've been so looking forward to this interview. And when I first heard you speak and heard your personal story, I reached out to you immediately because I just knew this is something that I know my community is going to benefit from. And it's such a big factor. And again, like I think it can be really easy to overlook or underestimate or just maybe even avoid. For thyroid and autoimmune patients.
Yes.
Really, I think for so many of us who are dealing with chronic illness and things. So maybe we could start there with your personal journey and how you became a specialist in the field of trauma healing.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I don't know that we maybe avoided it as much in the past as it just wasn't a topic of conversation like it's starting to become today. And I love that it is, because we're realizing we're this multidimensional being, that our health is influenced in so many different ways beyond just our food choices and how we're moving our body. And so that really was the case for me. I always say that I was born into trauma. And that is the way that looked for me, was that I had a single mother who was living through the lens of her own traumas. She was parenting in the ways that she knew best, but the best for her was what she had learned as a child, which was a lot of trauma and abuse. And so what that looked like for me as a child was that she wasn't around a lot emotionally and physically. She had a rotation of men in her life that were unhealthy as well. And their unhealthy habits and patterns and abuse was directed towards me. And so from a very young age, I had to learn how to grow up quickly, unfortunately, and um, figure out ways to live and survive in this environment of abuse and sexual abuse and neglect and emotional abuse and uncertainty of when I was going to receive love from my mother, or when she was not going to be there for me, whether she was physically there or not. And when we are children, whether we have big T trauma like I did, or little T trauma where maybe you just don't feel like you belong, like you don't feel like um you feel like you're an outcast in your family. It could be something as simple as that. That disconnect is such a painful wound, emotional wound for us as children. And we in order to survive and cope in an environment like that, we take it on ourselves. We take on the burden of thinking there's something wrong with me. I have to fix me. I have to I can no longer be authentic. So I hide who I am. I don't speak up. I be quiet. I try to blend into the corner. I make everything perfect so that I don't gather attention. And that really was my coping strategy as a child, was just to not speak up. So already I'm no longer using my voice to say, this is bad. I don't like this. Stop doing this to me. All of a sudden I'm no longer using my voice. I'm very quiet. And over the years, you just learn to, for me, that felt very normal. That was a normal environment. When I was about in my teenage years, early teenage years, my mother had remarried, and this man was very abusive, very manipulative, and the abuse towards me really amplified and got much more intense. I had told her about it a couple of times, and she never did anything about it. One time, the very first time, was very upset and said, okay, I'll talk to him. But the abuse continued, and it got more and more intense. And the second time I told her, she defended him. And so that was the point in my childhood where I thought, okay, if we're going to escape this experience, I'm going to have to figure out how to do this. I took on this burden of trying to figure out how to pull us and extract us out of this home with this man who was very manipulative and had isolated us from our family. So we were all alone. It was just my mom, him, and myself. What I ended up doing, because as a result of that, was trying to changed my behavior. Instead of fighting against the abuse, I started to just allow it to happen, to try to win over this person and try to win over his beliefs that this was okay, while in the background I'm trying to figure out, how do I get in touch with family? How do we run away in the middle of the night? What do we do? Which is unfair for a child to try to come up with an escape route. And it just so happened that there was one day at school, in middle school, that I had talked to a friend about what was happening in my home. And she really was an earth angel. And she had said, you know what, that's not normal. What you're experiencing is not normal. We need to go talk to somebody. I, at that time, didn't realize the magnitude of that decision, but I talked to a counselor and told them what was happening. And they immediately said, you know what, we have to report this. But we were going to get assigned a social worker. They kind of talked me through this process, but they're like, we have to report this. This, this is not okay, and you need to be protected. And I remember going home, I was panicking. And I remember I went home that day from school, and my mom, even though we had this very unhealthy relationship, the one thing that we did that always felt loving to me, it was like the only moment in our relationship that was loving, was every day after school, she'd come home from work and we'd go walking on this trail behind where we lived. And it had a little creek along it. And so there was water rushing, and it would be kind of, the sun would be setting. So it's glistening through the trees. And it was just a beautiful time for us to connect about our day, even though everything else in our life was really unhealthy. And so that night we went on our walk just like normal. And I remember walking back to our apartment, and I stopped her and I said, "Hey, I need to tell you something." And I proceeded to tell her what happened at school, what that I had shared what was going on in the home, and they were going to report it. And I remember she looked at me and had anger in her eyes, like daggers were just like shooting out of her eyes at me. And she said, "How could you ruin our family? How could you do this to us?" In that moment, I took on this belief. It was just like this, like weight, this brick that landed in my heart, in my soul, in my intuition, that was like, I can no longer trust my intuition. I can no longer trust my decisions. I can no longer trust to speak up, because when I do, life falls apart. And it was this really painful, I remember this feeling of like, oh crap, what did I do? Maybe she's right. Maybe I am destroying this family. Maybe that was the wrong thing. That belief really got cemented into my body a couple weeks later, when they, being my mom and the man that she was married to, took their life as a result of the speaking up. And he would have been arrested, she would have been arrested. There would have been a whole process of unpacking this, and they took their life. And so when they did that, and it's funny we're having this podcast now, because it's almost 30 years to the day that this happened. And my whole life changed. My whole life imploded. Everything I knew about my life completely changed. Different home, different schools. This was right before the summer, before I went into high school, and it was devastating. Right, like I've really held on to this guilt and this shame that I was the one that pulled the trigger that killed them both, and especially my mom. And it was the most painful emotional experience I could have ever had at the age of 14. Immediately after that, or soon after that, I started into therapy, and we used EMDR, and we were working on just processing the grief and the immediate just emotion of this tragic event. And it was about a year and a half. I was going every week. It was about a year and a half into that where I was like, I can't talk about this anymore. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want this to be my life. I don't want to be known as the girl who her parents killed them. She has these parents who took their lives, and she experienced like, I just didn't want this anymore. And my body was aching, all that trauma, all that guilt, all that shame, all of it had really taken a toll on my body. And from the time I was little till that time, I was living under a lot of stress, as you can imagine, from trauma in your home. But at that point in my life, I feel like every part of my body ached. I was in pain, physical pain, emotional pain. And I really felt like I was at the bottom of a well, dark well that I could not see any light, could not see anything beyond it. And the only thing I wanted was just to see my mom. I just wanted to see her, even though she was abusive in her own way, even though she was neglectful. That's all I knew. And we all have these complicated relationships with our parents, right? Even if they're not as abusive or neglectful as my mother was, but I just wanted to see her. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to know that I was not a failure, that I didn't do this. And what that turned into being was I thought, the only way out of this was to take my own life. And so one day at school, I left. I had a free period, left, went to the grocery store and bought a whole bottle of sleeping pills. And on the walk back, I swallowed all 30 of those pills and I blacked out. I don't remember getting back to the school. I don't remember sitting down where I inevitably woke up. But the only thing I remember is just waking up into this, feeling like I was waking up into this. It's beyond words, this loving, supportive, golden, pink space. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I've made it. I'm in heaven. I'm somewhere where I'm going to get to see my mom again. And I just remember thinking, I had, it was not like I was this body. It was like it's something completely different, something completely beyond life, beyond earth. It was very much beyond that. And I remember thinking, oh, I've made it. I'm going to get to see her. I'm so happy. I'm so relieved. All the pain, all the suffering was gone. And it was just like I was just in this space of love times a gazillion. And I can remember I remember I was like moving forward in some way, getting closer to this light, to this love. And I felt a hand on my chest. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was being pushed back. And I just heard the words, "It's not your time." And I woke up and I was sitting with my head on my backpack at a table at school. And it was the end of the school day. All the kids were rushing down the stairs. The bell was ringing, there's, chatter. And I just was like, what just happened? Why am I back? Like it was so shocking to me. And I was so angry. Like, why? I don't want to be here. I don't want this. And so I made my way home. A friend took me home and I was hallucinating. I was seeing things. It ended up having to call 911 because my body was shaking. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do anything. And I spent some time in ICU where they, took care of my system, kind of tried to flush it out as much as they could. And then I was admitted to a mental institution for a period of time where I was diagnosed with PTSD and was put on some strong medications and went through a whole protocol to go through therapy, group therapy, psychological therapy, I had multiple layers of things that was happening at that time to really process everything that I was experiencing at that moment. And as I was in there for a period of time, then got out, then finished high school. And I thought, as I finished high school, I finished my therapy and medication. I thought, okay, great, I'm good. Life can start. Peace. Let's move on. And what I ended up experiencing was something a little bit different than that, which was even though I went through all that therapy and I continued talk therapy off and on over the years, I still experienced a lot of anxiety in my body. I experienced a lot of these symptoms, stress. Gosh, I was under so much stress, so much anxiety. And I didn't understand at the time what was happening, but I really felt uncomfortable. I was not happy all the time. I was trying to put this facade on, this mask on of like, everything's good, everything's fine, trying to perfect my outer world. But really inside, I was feeling so out of control.
Mhm.
And I had a couple of kids, and during my pregnancies, I I developed thyroid disease as well as diabetes, and coped with those, figured out what to do. But as my life got more and more stressful as an adult, as the responsibilities started to pile on, as the kids, the house, the you know corporate career that I was in, um, my health got more and more worse, and I started to try to control more and more and more. So it was like, control the calories, control the food, control the workouts, control the the decor of the house, like everything had to be perfect. But inside, I was feeling so out of control with the stress, with the anxiety, with the depression. There were years where I was having flashbacks, so I was having to go back to therapy because of that. And emotionally, I was feeling like I just couldn't voice my needs. I wanted to say no so many times, but I didn't, because I felt like if I said no, people wouldn't like me. If I said no, I wouldn't understand how worthy I was, right? Like, my worth was tied into, yes, girl, yes, 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 do all these things, be all these things, all the while punishing my body, all the while, not eating the way I should have been eating, not being kind to my body, and really pushing it, like running constantly or being in the gym constantly. Like, it was like I was punishing my body to try and be perfect, all the while I'm not expressing my needs, all the while I'm saying yes all the time. So I'm abandoning myself in those years. And when my daughter, my youngest, was a toddler, she had this beautiful range of emotion, as all children do, and she could express happiness and joy, and then in the next minute she could express rage and anger, and it was just like this spectrum, and it was constant. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how to handle this, because for me, I was wanting to be the ideal person, the ideal woman, you know always calm, always collected, never raising her voice, never getting angry. And my daughter was just this big mirror for me that was so uncomfortable. I always wanted to try and control her anger and her rage and be like, oh, how can we fix this? What do you need? What can I give you to make you feel better? Instead of just letting her express that, because it was so uncomfortable for me, because I was not expressing that emotion. Until there was a certain point, she had this epic meltdown, like epic, of all the meltdowns, it was the most epic one. She's screaming and yelling, and my back is to her, and I'm washing the dishes, and I could feel this fire, little literal fire, rise from my feet into my legs, into my thighs, into my body. And it just, like, I could just remember thinking, she needs to shut up. Like, I can't handle this. I can't handle her screaming. She needs to shut up. And I'm washing the dishes. She's screaming. She's continuing. And it just explodes out the top of my head. And I turn around, and I had this glass in my hand, and I threw it at her feet on the ground. And I just screamed at her. And I was like, shut up, shut up. And immediately in that moment regretted it. And I looked at her face, and she's crying, and her eyes are real big, like, oh my gosh, like, who is this woman? And it was in that moment where I realized, okay, something is happening in my body that I don't know what is going on. And it's not like me to have these emotional outbursts. And they were getting more and more frequent with my children, especially. And I thought, I don't want to be this mom. Like, I need to figure out what's happening. And so I went to therapy, but it was a different type of therapy. It was a therapist who was trained in somatic experiencing, which is a body-based therapy. And so most of my therapy in the past had been talk therapy. And what I realized in going to see this other therapist who was trained in somatic experiencing was that our bodies, when we experience trauma, have their own story. We have the story that our head creates about it, but then our bodies have another story. And it's the story in our body that really is what we have to learn how to untangle and heal in order to experience that deep healing where we build up resilience in our nervous system, where we build up the capacity to be calm and grounded during stressful times, where we really start to release it from our cells and from our tissues, because we hold all of the trauma, we hold all those unrepressed or unexpressed emotions in our body. And when we don't express them, the only way they come out is through symptoms, health issues, emotional outbursts. Like I was classic, like everything I was holding on to eventually had to come out at some point. And it was definitely coming out at that time. So it was all of that to say, it was those experiences that really led me to get curious about the connection between trauma and chronic health issues. I had my own health transformation after my daughter was about 6 months old and my diabetes was really bad. I had a moment in time where I thought, if I don't change this, this is going to get worse. I'm going to get unhealthy. And I don't want her or my children, neither of my children, to grow up without a mom, or without a mom that's energized and can keep up with them. And so at some point in my life, I had become a nutritional therapist, a functional nutritional therapist. And I was seeing people all the while trying to heal myself too, and realizing there was such a strong connection between my clients' inability to make change, lasting change in our sessions, and the traumas they experienced as a child. And I was seeing that in myself too. Like, oh my gosh, I've experienced these traumas. I have thyroid disease. I have diabetes. I have chronic fatigue. Like maybe these are connected. Maybe the connections with my clients I'm seeing could be the same. And that's really what led me to get more curious about trauma and how it affects us, and how our beliefs, our behavior, our biology is so deeply affected by the traumas, but how it can also be reversed through certain practices and connecting to our bodies in certain ways.
Wow. Mandy, oh my gosh. I just want to like take a breath here after that just incredible and incredibly heartbreaking story. And I'm so sorry for all that you had to go through. Um, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this, but Mandy has this beautiful like medallion over her heart. And I'm like, oh, I want that there for you, that protection. I mean, no one should have to go through that. But I also know that we do go through these things. Like you said, there's little T and big T
Yeah.
traumas. And some of us have been through the big T.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, I just thank you for
Thank you.
sharing that story. I was wondering, it's got to be hard to share. Is it cathartic for you at this point to share that, or
Yeah.
healing in any way, or
I think at first, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, there was, you know, I for anybody who's experienced any kind of trauma, telling your story is a way of processing it. And also, it's a way to regain your voice, right? So, if you felt like you couldn't speak up as a child, it's a way of really reestablishing your voice, your strength. Today, I've told it so many times that now I always connect with it. It's all like I always get chills when I'm telling my story. But now I feel like it's more from a place of empowerment of like, hey, I want to show you that you can come from the worst of the worst experiences and get to the other side, and feel completely different and feel empowered in your life and in your health, and in your capacity to live the way you really want to live. And so it has changed over the years of telling it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I totally connect with that as a health coach, in how we can take maybe pains of our past and metamorphosize them into
Yeah.
helping ourselves, healing ourselves, and then
Yeah.
also helping to heal others through what we've been through. And I think that's such a
Yeah.
powerful thing to do with our trauma. So that's
Totally.
really beautiful. But you mentioned, the voice, and that's such a common root cause with thyroid patients to
Yes.
have that energetic blockage in
Yes.
throat chakra of feeling like I can't share my voice, I can't express myself, I'm not heard.
Yes.
When will it be my turn? When will I get what I need? And there's this, all of that, can be like this
Yes.
energetic blockage in the throat chakra. So that's just, something for the listeners maybe to think about is, am I using my voice to speak up for my needs, to advocate for myself with the doctors, to,
Yeah.
foster healthy boundaries, and even just to say, like, this is what I really want. This is what's important to me. This is what my dreams are, or whatever. So,
Yeah, we learn and we heal through story
mhm,
because, oftentimes we can see ourselves or a portion of ourselves in someone else's story and realize, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And I had a past client who had thyroid disease, who had chronic fatigue. And I can remember one of the things we were working on is her really looking at how and when she expressed herself or when she didn't. How many times was she saying yes versus how many times was she saying no? And one of the things I remember when she first came to me was she didn't feel seen in her home, even with her children. So, not feeling validated and seen as a mother of, like, I'm taking care of you. Why are you why are you yelling at me? Kind of thing. Like, it's so fascinating how however we felt as a child, whatever we experienced as a child really was happening during the times where we're developing our personality, we're developing our beliefs about who we are, we're developing our skills in terms of how we relate to others, how we are in relation with others. And that gets set at an early age when our brain is developing, when our body is developing. And so it makes sense that if we haven't had a chance to heal that stuff, that it would still show up for us as adults, that we would still have similar feelings of, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel validated, I can't speak up, or else. What is that or else? Well, that or else is probably something that happened as a child, some consequences to
mm,
some degree. So, yeah, it's very interesting how our thyroid and the health of our thyroid is so deeply connected to our ability to speak up, and our ability to speak up is impacted by what we experienced as a child.
yes, yeah, it's a big one, isn't it? I
Yes.
was curious too about, just sort of zooming out and looking at the, the things we do, the choices we make every day to try and feel better and heal ourselves, the basic kind of nuts and bolts of a
Yeah.
healthy lifestyle. And what are maybe some sneaky ways that trauma can show up with those
Yeah.
coaching clients where they're just not really getting to where they want to go with these things? Could you talk to us about
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. If we've experienced trauma as a child, whether it's big T or little t, doesn't matter. Um, we will develop this belief, whatever that belief is. So for me, it was like, I can't trust my intuition, I can't speak up. For someone else, that belief could be something different. But that trauma really affects our biology. It creates a big stress in our biology where our stress response is activated. And the more we experience that trauma over and over again, the more our body just attunes to reacting faster and faster and faster. So we're always kind of operating in this low key stress response, which affects our immune system. It affects our hormones. It affects our blood sugar. It affects every part of our biology. And so as we become an adult, if that over time deteriorates our health, right? That stress really affects us, and we might start to develop these chronic health issues as a result of being under the stress all the time. And perhaps over those years, we've also been repressing our emotions. And we can't separate the brain from the body or the emotions from our health. It's all intertwined. So once we get to the point where we have chronic health issues, we might really have this belief that I can feel better. I'm going to do these things and I'm going to take this action, and I believe this is the right choice for me. It's going to help me heal. But unconsciously, we might have beliefs running under the hood that are things like, I don't deserve to be healthy, or I'm not worthy of this. There's something wrong with me, so this isn't going to work anyhow. We might have these unconscious beliefs that are running under the hood that really sabotage our ability to create change in our health process. So we might find that we go to take action, we go to do the thing, and we're gung ho for the first week, maybe. And then after that, we might start to get exhausted. We might start to procrastinate. We might start to not have any motivation anymore to do it. And that can be a sign if it's a constant repeating pattern. So I'm going to try this new thing. Oh, this isn't working. I just can't figure it out, or I'm just exhausted. I'm going to do this different way. If this is a constant pattern, then that's an indication that there's something in our nervous system that's really preventing us from stepping fully into this place. Maybe I don't feel safe creating these changes. Maybe this unknown of who am I as a healthy person? Maybe that unknown is so uncomfortable to our bodies that we'd rather repeat and stay in a state of unhealthy patterns and behaviors. If we are in a state of constant stress and we're go, 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 we're doing the things. So we're yes, I'm going to run I'm going to run 5 miles today. I'm going to eat the green smoothie. I'm going to do all the things, but we're not seeing changes in our body. It could be because that stress, what we're doing and the way in which we're approaching it, is from a state of stress. We're adding to that level of stress in our body. And so when our body's in stress state, we can't heal. We can't release the weight. We can't release the health issue, whatever it is. We can't find peace because our operating state is already at stress. And if we're stressed and we're hustle, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to fall. We're not going to see the results, and then we're going to get frustrated. And so it's kind of this like complex web. It could be our unconscious belief system that is sabotaging us. It could be the state of our nervous system that's really sabotaging us. But I'm wondering if that helps answer your question.
Yes, yeah, it does. And so many thoughts come to mind about that too. Like one thing I commonly see is, well, there's a lot of different forms of fear that come up, and
Yeah.
it's not as simple as just I need to eliminate gluten from my diet. It's not as simple as that when we feel like, am I going to be a nuisance? Am I not going to belong?
Yes.
What will people think of me? Am I worthy of the, inconvenience that this is going to cause potentially other people?
Yeah.
We come face to face with and I'm just using eliminating gluten as an example.
That's a
But
very
we
good
really
example.
come
Yeah.
up against these things as
Yeah.
we're trying to make these changes. It goes so far beyond just, if I just do this, then I'll feel better. If I just drink the water and get the workouts in, I'll feel better. We've also got to look at all the scaffolding of our beliefs about making time for ourselves,
Yes. Yes.
speaking up for our needs, making healthy boundaries, letting ourselves know it's okay to say, look, gluten makes me sick. I'm sorry, I can't eat it." You know,
Yeah. Yeah. It
we have
really,
to learn to say those things. It doesn't
yeah.
always just come like that for.
No, no.
Hey, Thyroid Thrivers, Jenny here. I just want to pop in with a real quick message. If you're listening to today's show and thinking, I want to get started with this, I want to feel better, I need support, and that is my missing piece, I've got good news for you. I have created the group health coaching membership for thyroid thrivers just like you. It's called the Thrivers Club, and you can learn more about it at hypothyroidchef.com/membership. When you become a Thrivers Club member, you get access to me, your personal on-demand health and cooking coach, a full recipe library of thyroid-friendly recipes. You get access to an amazing, positive, healing-focused community of other thyroid thrivers who get it and who know what it's like to face the unique challenges that we face. You also get access to loads of expert resources created not just by me, but by other thyroid experts, doctors, nutritionists, all kinds of brilliant minds in the thyroid space. And one of the best parts about the Thrivers Club, and really where the results happen for people, is that you get access as a member to our monthly wellness challenges. And those wellness challenges just provide extra inspiration and motivation to make those small but mighty steps that get us where we want to be on our healing journey. Let's find out what happens when you have that support that you need. I'd love to welcome you to the Thrivers Club. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to hypothyroidchef.com/membership. So check out the Thrivers Club today. Okay, back to the show.
There's this study that was done in the 1980s where it was done to I believe it was like a study of, like, if I'm remembering it right, around 300 people, and they were obese, and they were looking at the connection between adverse childhood experiences, so traumas and neglect and abuse and that sort of thing during the 0 to 18 years, and chronic health issues. And so in this case, they were looking at it through the lens of obesity. And these people were going through a program to recover their health and to lose the weight. And what they noticed was about 50% of the study participants had experienced some level of trauma. In this case, it was sexual abuse trauma. And one of the participants was explaining to the folks who were running the study that when they started to lose the weight, when they started to follow the protocol and lose the weight, they realized that all of a sudden they were feeling anxiety, and they were feeling tense, and they were feeling scared, that all of a sudden they had this level of fear. And what they realized was that in losing the weight, it was confronting the reason why they kept the weight on it to begin with, which was for this particular person, it was protection. So they felt like the heavier they were, it was protecting them from ever experiencing any type of abuse again. And so in losing the weight, all of a sudden it started to bring up feelings of feeling unsafe in their body, because now they felt vulnerable. I'm thinner, I'm going to attract more unhealthy attention and behaviors. And I share that to say, anytime we're working on our health is so intimately connected to our emotions, and it's intimately connected to, most often, our childhood. And so when we are looking to heal our autoimmune condition, when we're looking to regain our energy, and we're changing our diets and we're moving our bodies differently, our emotion, there's going to be a state of emotion that comes up with it. What is happening? What are we being faced with? What is this chronic health issue or this health condition helping us face that's related to our past? And those emotions are going to come up around it because they're tied. Our emotional state and our immune system is intimately connected. So it's going to come up as we're healing our body. Those emotions are going to come up so that we can heal them, not to be a nuisance, not to say, oh, oftentimes we may not want to look at it, but it's there. They will come up to be healed so that we're healing the whole part of our body. We're not healing just the health. We're not healing just the movement, but we're deeply healing so that we can operate differently in our bodies.
It really does take that whole life, whole health approach. And that includes, our emotional and spiritual and mental health.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for that. That touches on, my next question, which was just how do we build that awareness of how those traumas might be showing up for us in physical ways? With your example about the obesity and the ACEs score, and for the listeners, that the
Yeah.
ACEs score is a great starting point to
Yeah.
maybe start building awareness about maybe your emotional trauma. And it's free, you can look it up online. But
Yeah.
it's adverse childhood experiences, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I've taken it, and a lot of us are going to have an ACEs score. And
Yeah.
the higher your ACEs score, this has been studied. There's a lot of scientifically backed data that shows that the higher our ACEs scores are, the more likely we are to have disease and chronic
Yes.
illness and stuff like that. So there's very much a correlation. And I remember I went through an adult big T trauma. I had an ectopic pregnancy. It
Mm.
wasn't viable and it ruptured. And so I was bleeding to death internally. I had to have emergency surgery in one of the worst regional hospitals in the country. I was
Oh
living in
my God.
Alaska at the time. Sorry, Alaska. Not the
Oh
best
my
medical
goodness.
care where I was living. And I came home from that and I just wanted to, you kind of touched on this in your story. I just wanted to put it behind me and get on with my life. I wanted to get back to what I was doing, and I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel it. I just wanted to like busy myself
Yeah.
past it. And
Yeah.
what happened, that I think, Mandy, was really when I think about the start of my thyroid issues, that's when it started. That was in 2007, and I wasn't diagnosed until 2011. But I remember my hair falling out. I remember a
Yeah.
lot of fatigue. I had heart palpitations where I had to like wear a heart monitor. For the first time in my life, I was having anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
I was having insomnia. I got shingles. It was just like
Mm.
boom, 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 all within 2 months of my recovery of this emergency surgery and the loss of my first pregnancy and all this stuff. And I remember going to my doctor and I was just like, what is going on with me? I
Mm.
don't
Yeah.
it's like this cascade of health issues. And she said, you need to go home and cry.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was it was the best advice I could have gotten. I really did. I needed to go home and cry and journal and feel it and grieve.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I did that that the symptoms started to go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a
Yeah.
huge eye opener for me about how the body keeps the score.
Yeah.
And just that building awareness of how our emotional trauma can show up in very physical ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, without having that doctor, though, I wonder, and her wisdom, how might people build some awareness around that, where like you mentioned the example of, the obesity and that person who felt they were having that anxiety when they lost weight, and it can be hard to connect those dots sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But is there any like
Mm-hmm.
little things we can do to help us,
Yeah.
build that awareness around that, besides maybe like the ACEs score? I think is a good starting point, but
Totally.
just what else
100%.
can we
And I
learn?
just want to say too, that's a beautiful example. And I'm sorry that you went through that. And I'm so thankful that you had a doctor that said, just go feel this, like go cry,
Yeah.
because it's in the process of feeling. Oh, we are, we live in a society, we live in a culture that tells us to go, go, go. We're in this like hustle mentality. We're normalizing dysregulated nervous system states. We're normalizing, being outside, looking for the answers outside of us, when really the answer lives within us. And it's hand on the heart, it's crying, it's feeling what needs to be felt, you
Mhm.
know. And so I love that you had that experience. Not that the story, not that you I don't love that you had the experience of your health, but glad you had someone there, a competent
Yeah.
adult to help you identify that,
Yeah.
that activity. Um, yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing really is getting curious about our experiences without judgment. So many times when we are working with health, when we're working with our own health, we can be really judgmental towards ourselves, right? Like, why is this food, why can't I eat this food anymore? Why can't I do this? Why, like, why can't you just be healthy, body? Just be healthy. Like we can be so judgmental towards our bodies, and
Mm.
they hold so much wisdom. They hold so much of our journey and what can help us. And so, the one thing I really work on with a lot of people is how can we be more loving towards our bodies and just be thankful that they're showing us what needs attention. They're showing us what we need to focus on and getting curious. So what that means is, getting curious about if I had an emotional outburst, if I was feeling really stressed at the end of the day, and or I, realize I can no longer eat this food and I'm really upset about it. Like getting curious, like why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now? What's happening? What could be underneath this? Why? I like there's an exercise I do with people sometimes called why times 7. So really essentially it's like trying to get to the root of the thing. So why am I upset? Why did I just have that emotional outburst? Because she yelled at me. Okay. Why would why did you feel like you needed to yell back at her? Well, because I don't know, because it made me mad. Okay, well, what made you mad? Why were you mad? Like we're trying to get to the root of things. And so I think to do that, you really just have to get curious about your experiences
Mhm.
in life. Why am I feeling this way that I'm feeling right now? Why did I do that one thing I did right now? Why did I say yes to that when I really
Mhm.
wanted to say no to that? Why do I feel so angry at my body?
Yeah. Why times 7? I love that. It makes me think of, my son when he was a toddler, just, but why? But why? And then you
Yes.
answer, but why? But why? Those so many kids go through that phase, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, there's something to that. That makes total sense. Just that
Yes.
getting really curious about what's going on here and what's beneath that and what's beneath that and then what's the
Yes.
next lower.
Here's the thing too, that's really simple, and I think a lot of people reject it because it requires us to get a little bit vulnerable, and that is just spending time with yourself in silence,
Mm,
whether that is in nature. I'm a big advocate of nature and the
mm,
ability for nature to help us connect to our bodies and in our intuition and what we really need. And so whether that's, bare feet in the grass, or it's sitting up to a tree and you're just spending time looking at things, looking at the colors, looking at the shapes, looking at the sun glistening through the leaves, looking at the blades of grass, just getting really curious about the present moment. So getting yourself into the present moment, especially in nature, is so powerful and so healing. And it can be the pathway to helping us connect to what's going on in our bodies when we start to get still. And when I say stillness, I don't mean like quiet your mind and like not have any
sure.
thoughts in there, but let's focus our attention on our senses. What are we seeing? What are we smelling? What does that bring up for us when we see the tree? What does that bring up for us when we smell the flowers blooming in the garden? What comes up for us when we feel our feet in the grass? And just getting the opportunity to allow our bodies to speak to us, and sit there and listen. There's so
Mhm,
much wisdom in our bodies, and sometimes we have to be outside of our environment to really hear it and feel it.
mhm.
And we all have that capacity. We all have the ability to place our hand on our heart space and just ask, what's going on in my body today? What does my
Yeah.
body need from me to feel safe, to feel protected, to feel loved, to feel validated? Because when we can meet those needs, our health starts to improve. It's when we're avoiding taking care of ourselves, it's when we're rejecting our needs, when we're not speaking up, the health issue gets bigger, it gets louder because it's saying help. There's
Mhm.
something here we need to take care of. And the only way I can get your attention is if I'm, if my thyroid's not working, if my pancreas isn't working, if my energy is drained, like the more we can build in a practice of just asking what's happening in my body today.
Mhm.
What does my body need from me right now? And actually honoring that starts to build this trusting relationship with our body. Then our body feels more safe to bring up maybe things that have been there for a while that need healing, that need attention, that need love. But the more we can be curious, the more we can be really respectful and kind to our bodies, and the more we listen to them and just ask the question, what does my body need right now? That will send us down the path of healing.
Mm. This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, and any of my drivers club members who are listening are, they're like, oh, I know what's coming because I've heard her say this so many times, but the body speaks to us. If we listen to its whispers, we don't have to endure its screams. And I
Mm,
don't know who said that. I've looked it up. It was on the wall at a chiropractor's office years ago, and it just always stuck with me. So I can't, unfortunately, give credit to who said it, but boy, it sure rings true. I want to talk a little bit about, like, I honestly don't even know how to ask this because it feels like such an enormous question, but how can we overcome trauma in order to heal ourselves emotionally, spiritually, physically? How do we do that? How do we get
yeah.
started with that? I know you mentioned somatics, and
Mm-hmm.
but can you maybe kind of walk us through what that might look like? I know yeah, just such a big question, and it's going to look so different and so
Yeah.
multifaceted. But yeah,
Yeah.
what
I
are
think we can it- is healing trauma, to your point, is this like it's a wide thing, and everyone's path to it looks a little different. Some people end up healing their traumas through their health and through the transformations and the process they go through their health. Some people heal it from their spiritual practice first. Some people heal it through other avenues and ways. And so I think first and foremost, we have to let go of the expectation that it's going to look a certain way
you?
or that I need to do this or that. I think for everybody, regardless of how we get to the trauma healing, is learning to build this connection with our body, because our body, our tissues, our cells hold the memories of our past, hold the traumatic energetic blueprint from the past. And so if we are neglecting our bodies, if we're neglecting our needs, like I said, it'll just, our bodies respond to that repression through symptom. And so we have to find ways to connect to our body, to start to get curious about what's happening in our bodies. So there are things we can do on our own, like adopting a be kind to your nervous system lifestyle. And I love this because what that means is that we're no longer forcing our bodies, we're no longer forcing ourselves to do things we don't really want to do or feel like they'll be helpful for us in the moment. So we're being kind. We're, instead of rushing into our day, maybe we take 5 minutes to connect to our breath and we do some deep breathing. We're being kind to our bodies by maybe building in a break in the middle of the day to get outside in the sun, to feel the sun on our face, to ask body, what do you need right now? To really start to slow down. Because oftentimes when we're in a stressed state, we are operating in a high high modality where we're go go go, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're a parent, we're a career person, we're taking care of elderly parents, we're doing all the things, and we're neglecting just like settling.
Mm.
So slowing down, settling into our bodies, I think things like that, meditation, yoga, tai chi, whatever it is that's going to allow us to slow down and to connect to ourselves, can be an entry point into trauma healing. But when we are actually doing trauma healing, when we do have stuff from the past that we need to heal, we can't heal all of that on our own, because we heal in relation, we heal in connection with others. We need another nervous system that is calm, that is healed, that is grounded for us to attune to, for our nervous system to connect to and see, oh, that's what that feels like to be in that state. If I've constantly been in stress, if I've been in my trauma vortex for a while, I'm not going to know how to do that on my own. I'm not going to know how to connect to a calm place. So I need someone else to tune to see what that's like. So I believe the best trauma methods, best trauma healing methods are ones that connect you to your body. And so the one that worked for me, that I am trained in, that I love the most, is somatic experiencing. And that's a modality of trauma healing that helps you learn how to interpret your nervous system, how to interpret how it's speaking to you, how to interpret the signs it's giving you, and how to connect with it so you can start to heal it and bring back in the parts of you that may have been, disconnected. So you're bringing back in a sense of wholeness, of healing, and resiliency. You're building in resilience in your nervous system the more you do that work, so that you can handle life. Because we're all going to experience stress. We're all going to have the ups and downs of life, but it's in our ability to have resilience to navigate those, and get back to a state of calm when we're in a state of stress, that really can help us withstand life, in a way that's helpful and healing, and to some degree peaceful for us.
Mm.
So if we're going to heal trauma, I really think that, one, looking at our lifestyle, looking at how can we honor our needs more? How can we take care of ourselves in a kind way more, is beautiful. But if there's some deep things we need to work on, we need to work on them with someone who can help us attune to that in a very body-based way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I wanted to ask you about somatics. So thank you for that explanation. That was something I started. This was before we lived in Alaska. I started doing somatic movement. And then after that ectopic pregnancy in Alaska, as part of my healing journey there, I started
Yeah.
doing somatic experiencing with a practitioner there to heal from that. And what I personally love about somatics and find so powerful about it is how it transcends language. We
Yes.
have this, and I love words. I'm a writer, I'm in love with all of that, right?
Yeah.
But it's limiting.
Yeah.
It's limiting.
Yeah.
There's so much more nuance and complexity in us beyond just the words that are in the dictionary, even though there's tens of thousands of them.
Yeah.
And to tap into those things that go beyond just the story, the word for the feeling or whatever
Yes.
it is,
Yes.
physically is incredibly powerful
It
and
is.
healing. Yeah.
There are some people who will come to me and say, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I know I had some sort of trauma, but I don't remember it. I think I did. And what's lovely about the somatic experiencing work is that you don't have to have a memory where you're saying, hey, I know this happened. I know X, Y, and Z happened. Our bodies really remember without us needing to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, it's beyond the words. Like our nervous system, our bodies, the way we react to something may be so primitive. Maybe it happened when we were an infant and we didn't have words to describe it, but we had our response to it in how we moved our body and how we avoided it or how we ran from it. Like our bodies are interpreting our life in so many ways beyond just the words we can come up with to describe it. And this work is so wonderful because it taps into helping our bodies recalibrate, heal that response without needing that story. We don't, when I'm working with someone, I don't even need you to tell me the story. I know you want to tell me the story because it's important, but we don't even need it because the body's already telling the story in the way it's responding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about, like the stomach. the
Yes.
gut and how it holds so much emotion and
Yes.
can hold so much trauma, and then that manifests in so many different kinds of pain and imbalance and digestive issues. And
Yes.
just that as an example could be one way to sort of come into more awareness around this. I think about, like the seven whys. Well, why do I feel so unsettled in my gut when
Yeah.
this happens?
Yes.
And oh, now I'm in this other stressful situation, and here this is happening
Yes.
in my gut again. And just, I think, yeah, connecting those dots between what we're feeling and how it's manifesting physically in our body is, somatics can maybe help us cross some of those thresholds and boundaries with that, to more awareness of just how our emotional and spiritual selves affect our physical selves. Yeah.
100%. That's a great example. And that is one that happened to me as well. It was a big awareness for me when I was in corporate, when I would get so stressed in my job, I would get so bloated. My stomach would get so bloated, it would look like I was pregnant and I would have pain. And I remember thinking, like, why does my stomach do this every day at work,
Mhm.
but it doesn't do this on the weekends? All
Mhm.
of a sudden I started to get curious and want to know more without judging it. But I just wanted to figure out, like, why does my stomach bloat so much at work? But then at home, my stomach doesn't bloat at all. And I, started to just pay attention every time it happens and noticed, oh my gosh, it happens every day at work because I'm got a stressful schedule and I'm rushing and I don't feel like I can get it all done and I'm panicking. Like there was a level of panic and anxiety and it was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Those feelings of panic and anxiety are manifesting in my stomach. My stomach is so once I made that connection, then I would realize, okay, now I can do something about it. And I would do meditations, tapping meditations at work in the middle of the day to try and help manage my emotional state and keep me in a state of peace, less anxiety, less panic.
Mhm.
And that's what I really mean about getting curious about your experiences and just noticing, like, how does my body feel when I'm at work versus at the grocery store versus at home with the kids versus, with my in-laws or with my friends. Our bodies will interpret the environment we're in very different ways based off of our emotions. And so if we don't quite understand that yet, we can just pay attention to, I feel relaxed here. I'm happy, I'm joyful versus, oh, I feel anxious, like tense. I can feel my shoulders getting really tight here, and just getting really curious about that, journaling about it, writing it down, just paying attention. That can
Mhm.
be a starting point.
And like you said, being kind to your nervous system, like with your little tapping ritual at work. I mean, what did it take? 5, 10 minutes
Right.
to do that?
Yes.
Just those simple things, or some belly breaths or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be elaborate or complicated in any way. Sometimes just we come back to our bodies and we build that relationship with our bodies and say, I'm here for you. I got you.
Yes.
I'm gonna take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do some, we're feeling a little bloated here at our corporate job. Let's take some belly breath or do
Yes.
tapping or whatever it is. Yeah. Um, Gosh, Mandy, we could talk for hours. I know we're going long. I have one more question for you before we wrap it up.
Okay.
And this is something that's really been on my mind, because I've been on kind of my own journey with, looking at past stuff and doing different kinds of therapies around that. And something I sort of bump up against, and I'm curious to get your take on, is how much healing do you feel is really possible? Like healing of trauma, like to what level and degree? Because I think that's something maybe other people struggle with too, where we're looking at these emotional root causes. We can build awareness. We can use that awareness to change our patterns and behaviors. But does the hurt ever really go away? Because in my experience, it's still there. It's not driving my choices as much. But the pain is still there. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, and maybe like what our expectations should be around this healing work when it comes to trauma.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I ask myself this question a lot too. And I think for me, I can only speak to my experience and what I believe based off of my experience. But I believe we can get to a point where that hurt is no longer there, that maybe we see it through a different lens,
Mm,
um, through more of that healed kind of whole lens versus the part of us that experienced it, seeing it through that part. But I think that we have to set the right expectations when we go on when we decide to go down this path of healing. And the expectations need to be that it's going to take however long it takes, and we can't rush it. We can't force it to happen in a certain way. Or, I used to think like anytime it would be time for me to go back to therapy, I'd think, okay, well, I got 3 months. We're just going to knock this out in 3 months and we're going to be good. I'm going to be done. I can
yeah,
just get to the other side. Right. And that's not how it happens,
yeah.
like, because it's not our brain that we're trying to work through the process. It's our body, and our body
Mm,
holds that in such a very unique way that it needs time to process. It needs time for us to settle into that new place before we can go to that next level of healing. And so I think we have to let go of the expectation that it's going to look a certain way, that it's going to be in a certain amount of time. And there's some level of surrender, I think, that we have to accept in that process and trust
mm,
that that healing is still happening, that we're making different choices, that we're, a little bit better than we were the day before, that even if we have a setback, that we're still progressing and we're still learning and we're still growing. And I do think that we can get to a point where that hurt is no longer there. And in fact, I just had this awareness the other day about my own experience. So it was just recently Mother's Day. And I was reflecting back to all the thoughts I used to have about my own mother. And I looked at her and my experience in this lens of like, well, she showed me what I don't want to do as a mother. It was very much like this negative, you showed me how not to be because I don't ever want to be like you, right? Like it was just this very negative belief. And recently, over the last few years, that belief has really started to change. And I thought, well, actually, she did show me some things that I did want to be. And, there were parts of her that were kind. There were parts of her where we connected. There were parts of her where she taught me how to be a cook. She was a really great cook, like as humans, we're so complex. We're not just one thing. It's not just one thing in our journey. It can be that and something else too.
mm,
And so for me, I had this big awareness of like, well, she actually showed me what I wanted to be, parts of me that I wanted and parts of, her that I didn't want. And in that complexity of yes, and you can be both this example of what not to be, but also an example of some parts that I do want to take on as a mother and as an adult. I am able to see her more with love and compassion, and see her in a place of she did the best she could. She didn't know any better. She didn't, in her generation, they weren't healing trauma. They were repeating the cycles of trauma. That's all that they knew. That's all that she knew. And I can hold compassion for her, even though she did things that really hurt me and that she put me in positions that were very hurtful. I can see her through that lens of she was a human and
mm,
she was doing the best she could. And she, had parts of her that were beautiful and kind and parts of her that weren't so great. And I think that's true for our healing journey as well, that our healing journey can be this complex, hard at times, uncomfortable, messy experience, but it can also be a place of love and joy and just accepting where we're at in the moment and not needing it to be any different, while also believing and having trust that we can continue further down and it can experience another level. And so I think with trauma healing, we can get there. I know because I feel like I'm there. I don't hold pain from my past anymore. I don't hold shame or guilt or anger about my past. It's just my past. It's just what happened, in the first 20 years, 30 years of my life. But I can look at it through a different lens and have it impact me in a different way. But I don't think we should use that. We should use anyone else's experience as like, okay, this is what I need mine to be in this moment. I think there's a lot of surrender in the process. We just got to surrender to letting it unfold the way it unfolds and letting it happen the way it happens and being okay with, I'm in this place right now in the journey, and that's okay. And I can, feel the pain and I can feel the peace at the same time.
Yes, perfectly put. That's so beautiful, Mandy. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your wisdom and your expertise and your story and your message of hope with us today. I really appreciate it. It's been just a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you on the show. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people go to learn more about you?
I'm on Instagram at Mandy L. Harvey. I'm on Facebook, Mandy Harvey. And my website is traumahealingforcoaches.com. And you can also go to the stopyourbrainbully.com, which is probably the best place for everyone to check me out. That's a free gift I'd like to offer to your audience, which is a wonderful series on just unpacking all the ways in which we tend to hold perfectionism and some other ways in which we tend to beat ourselves up on the journey, and how to overcome that and start to see ourselves through the lens of love and compassion and grace.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Well, I will definitely pop that link in the show notes for the listeners. So, did you say stopyourbrainbully.com for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much again, Mandy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and spending this time with us today. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Your support means so much, and it truly helps a lot. If you'd like more information or one-on-one support, you can find me at hypothyroidchef.com. Once again, I'm Ginny Mahar, your thyroid health and cooking coach, wishing you happy cooking, happy thriving, and the best of health. See you next time.